I know we have this new thing about a scribe. Um, yeah, I guess. Do you know anything about that? Like what that is
I
exactly?
I think Natalie may have put it, so or someone from the core team, but it's the idea is that rather than everything being in this recorded video, we
Hmm.
put notes in there, and there would be a designated scribe who is in charge of taking down the notes while we are
Okay,
talking.
cool. All right. Do we have a scribe? It's only me and you. All right. Who do you want to? Do you want to facilitate, run through the items, and then I could scribe, or the inverse?
Uh, I think the inverse is probably easier.
All right. So that makes me the facilitator, right?
Yes.
All right. Let's go through status updates. I can go through this one real quick. Yesterday, I think you saw I did a little bit of reviews on the docs. The Docker file or Docker comparison looks really good, so appreciate that. I did start doing the Git pod integration stuff, which hopefully it's not too much of a burden into all our repos. I did get some feedback or more or less a question about whether or not we had too many integrations in our repos. And I kind of specifically on Git pod, I pushed back in the form that this isn't like some of the other GitHub action integrations or bot integrations. It's more like a configuration for tooling that people may or may not want to use. Personally, I'm using it. So obviously I have a personal desire for it to be integrated or available. So yeah, any feedback there would be appreciated if we want to talk about that. Other than that, I did notice that in the community page, our Slack button was missing because we no longer use Slack in. So I went ahead and created the quick fix for that. That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah. For me, I was mostly just addressing, like, fixing that Docker file comparison page and addressing your comments. Sorry. Thanks. And think I addressed most of it. One other interesting thing that I think we may want to talk about later is like we track the issues in docs repository, but I think we also own the community repository. At least I get tagged as a learning maintainer whenever someone opens a pull request there. Um, so I don't know if you want to track the issues there. Somehow there are a bunch of stale issues which are present.
Okay. Yeah, let's review that, I guess, as part of the agenda, and we can maybe dive into a little bit more detail there.
Yeah. Uh, Apart from that, I think last time we mentioned a couple of things around how to get more doc contributors, like maybe adding like what can you do for Buildpacks page to a community or contribution side, or maybe adding a contribution guidelines to the community page. I don't know if like last time you weren't there, so I was just curious to get your thoughts on that. Um,
Cool. I'll also add that to the agenda because I feel like that's a pretty good topic to discuss. And it sounds like you've had some conversations with some people, and I know I've had in the past as well. And so maybe we could just continue to have these conversations and brainstorm as maintainers.
And I think the one other thing that I was like looking into is uh, recently I noticed like we were reaching out to people for like integrations with CNB or like where we want like their stuff integrated into build packs. I was thinking about the reverse where other projects are considering integrating CNB. So we have the adopters page, I know, which is like people who have already adopted uh, CNB, I wanted to figure out whether there's like projects or organizations considering the adoption and whether we can track that somewhere so that if they need help or if they get stuck on something, maybe we can reach out to them. I've seen like with this Gitpod stuff and with Sixstore and Cyclone DX, like the recent projects I've interacted with, the community is a lot more aggressive in marketing. Like they literally go to your repository, see if you have any blockers or are willing to go to other people's office hours and like do demos or things. I don't
Hmm.
know if that's something you want to consider or like maybe just track.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Also added that to the agenda. Do you have a particular, well, let's go through, I guess, the other stuff like standing item, user research. I don't think there's anything here, given that at least not here to get an update there. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement there anyway. The next item is the unlabeled items. So this is the KubeCon slides. Is this talking about the office hours ones?
Uh,
Oh, it's talking about multiple. Cool. All right. So I'll assign myself to this and I'll add the team, our team. Cool. All right. That was easy. Okay, moving on. So we've got three topics, of which are yours. Which one do you care more deeply about that you want to get into the weeds first?
uh, Maybe we can start with the community one since that's relatively small.
Okay.
So let's see. So I think, for example, add contributors guide. This may be something which may be on us, or I don't know who owns this. Uh, so this, I don't know if it's talking about like adding it to the website, to the community page, linking to other contributing .mds, or just making sure that other projects or like other repositories in our organization have a contributing .md.
Yeah, I guess this is interesting. So if you go to the community, like the code tab, there is a quote unquote contributors guide that I produced a while back. Um, and so there's this, and I think this might tie into two topics, right? It's like how to like on here it does specify things like being able to contribute to docs, right? Um, I guess what may be missing is like the visibility to this document for one, right? And then maybe any improvements to this document. Um, Again, this is solely biased because I wrote it, right? So like if there's a different approach, I'd be interested to hear about it.
I, for what it's worth, like last time we were discussing something similar. So, for example, there was this page called "What Can I Do for Mozilla," which is like their version of like contributing. Sorry, so you can tell this that this is basically powered by a YAML template which you can modify, and it's
Hmm.
got these questions and links. So you ask these questions and then these links take you to the next question or a leaf node which is like
Right,
a web.
right.
So like if you're interested in writing more code, like no, not interested, user design, okay, and then like you can click here and it takes you to the exact repository. So maybe we don't need something as complicated, but even just having something like this on our website in the community page, or I don't know if we should have like a separate contributing page where people who are interested in figuring out how they can contribute can do that, or maybe we can just link to this markdown.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that like this particular page, right, is difficult to discover. Because even well, I feel like a lot of documents on GitHub itself, right, like that are hosted on GitHub are hard to discover and hard and like even maintainers, I've seen them point to other resources like blog posts or whatever. Like let's say what is it? The commit signing, right? Like we have a page for commit signing as part of our high level contributing guide, right? That tells you exactly like why we do it and how to do it. But like we would still point them to like somewhere else. That's like just one example of where I feel like we're not leveraging what we've created. And there might be like really good reasons, right? And I think for me, I see it as they're just not discoverable enough, or maybe they're not up to par with what we really want. And so one of those two things needs to be addressed, or maybe both, right? And so I do think that to solve the discoverability aspect of it, right, if we have it on the docs page, or sorry, if we have it on our actual website, that would make it by far a lot more discoverable, right? And to then talk about the second point where it might not be up to par with what we need or want, then hopefully others could also, because it's again more discoverable, people read it, read through it, they could actually create PRs to improve it as well, right? So maybe that it all kind of stems from that direction.
Yep. Should should there also be like direct links here to both the repositories and like a filter with good first issues tagged in each of these repositories so that like, hey, I'm new. Like, so one thing that I've noticed in like uh, the only example I can think of is like the Python bug tracker. So that's
Mhm.
got different levels of issues. So like if you are someone entirely new to the project, what are like good places to start with? And as a person who has contributed a couple of PRs and is familiar with one component of the repository, um, this may be a good starting point for you to discover more components or to dive deeper into that same component. I don't know if you have any thoughts on like managing issues in that way, like labeling them with more details. I guess it also makes sense when you have enough issues to uh, require that level of management.
Yeah, that's, I was going to get into the idea or the notion that I think we could definitely improve the curating of issues, right? I think we've had this discussion, at least internally, where as developers, as engineers, we tend to focus on getting stuff done, right? And we are, let's say that we're ultimately very productive in that fashion, but it doesn't seem like it scales really well, right? When we think about like, okay, so now we're just a handful of developers in this sort of silo, cranking out issues as much as possible. But if we really want to scale, I think there's a lot to be said about being able to curate issues so that others can consume them. So we ended up with this like triage process at some point. So if you click on the triage page down there,
Yeah.
right? Like this actually goes and like tells you like what a good first issue looks like, right? Because this is something that we identified that you can't put a good first issue label on something that isn't clearly defined. Right. So like you can't go and I don't know what's a really good example. Like even the source metadata thing, right? That I'm a mentor for, right? Like if it just says implement source metadata as the issue and it just says look at this RFC, like it's super vague, right? Um, but we added like the criteria for good first issues to have acceptance criteria, right? And so like the responsibility of this, I think, lands on the maintainers to do their part. And I think just maybe overall more focus there. And again, if the quote unquote process needs to be improved, then we should be looking at that. But this is what we came up with, right? So I think at this point, I'm just kind of giving you historical context of where we've been and what is available to
Right.
see
So
like why haven't we done this, right? Like maybe that's the problem that we need to solve.
because I saw this, and then I think somewhere, yeah, this one. I also saw this, which uh, went into this RFC, which I think you created around like synchronizing labels
Mhm.
so that people know exactly which labels should be there in a repository, or like if you need new ones, and what the description for each of them should say across different repositories.
Yeah.
And so like and I was just wondering, like, do we have any updates on these? Because these are like a bunch of these are issues that were opened in 2020, and I don't see any updates on them. So I was just going through a community repository and wondering, like, should we be actively like figuring out whether this is still needed? If not, close them, or if it's needed, like figure out how to track them.
I guess one thing that we do for other subteam syncs, like the platform, we have a needs discussion standing item, and so
Mhm.
does implementation team. We don't have that for learning team. I wonder if, like, at least there's two right there, right, that are kind of stale that say discussion needed. Like, we probably should have talked about them at some point or another in this meeting. So that seems something tangible right now to just add a needs discussion to our standing items. Um, as far as the other ones go, I guess what is like I get that they're stale, right? And I get that we need to update them. Um, is there anything specific that you're proposing
No,
at
I
this
was
point?
just wondering whose responsibility is it to update this, like whether it's our responsibility or not. If it is, then we should include this in our like the I don't know. So like these unlabeled issues, I wonder if we should have like a stale issues or stale PRs section, which shows issues that are more than 30 days old without
Hmm.
activity.
Yeah.
Uh, so like at least we're tracking things that are getting stale. I remember I read somewhere where it was like, I think it was the contribute. I don't remember. Somewhere in the community repository, it was like 30 days for stale issues or something like that was proposed. Like you should not leave a PR open for 7 days without like getting asking for some updates and issues for 30 days without asking for some.
Hmm.
I don't know where I saw that.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we start getting into this like problem that I guess not only us all face, right? But like I think the open source community faces, where it's like if you go to like any major project, I'm sure you'll find a lot of outdated old issues, right? So that's like one option. Then there's the other option where you have like a very aggressive stale bot, right? Like that is always just nagging you, like, hey, I'm gonna close this, and you're like, no, 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 it's still important, right? And like we still care about it, and kind of getting caught in that. I'm not entirely sure which one of the two is best. Um, right now, I
So
feel like we're definitely on the former, where we're just kind of letting stuff stack up.
I was thinking rather than like something active like a stale bot, if we just like have a link here which shows old issues and we try to go through some of them manually, like maybe in the most recent order. So we have the most recent issues on top, um,
Yeah.
or the most recent pull request, because I think we don't do it for pull requests either. And then some pull requests end up sitting there for a long time. Um, until someone notices. And like it doesn't have to be like a bot reminding us. Maybe we can just do it during this meeting.
Yeah,
Uh,
I totally agree. I think that's worked fairly well for us. I'm not sure how well it'll scale overall, right? But it has worked okay. I don't like that it's like that there's like synchronicity necessary, like us having to go into this room to like discuss them. So I'm not a huge fan of that, but I'm maybe not trying to solve that right now, right? Like maybe that's something that we could solve later. Do you mind if I add that as an action item for you to
yeah,
create just like that thing? Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. So I added it on the learning agenda standing items, but I
Okay.
can't seem to ever assign stuff to you, like link you.
I don't know why.
You're like perfect. Could you assign it to yourself? Yeah. See, I can't do that. Like it lets me assign to anybody else but you. Maybe that's a good thing.
I don't think it lets me assign you either. Maybe it's got something to do with domains or something. I don't know what's wrong here.
Yeah.
But okay. So that's tracking issues. Um, I think that's pretty much it. This was like the other integration tracker I was curating today about like other open source projects that are considering Buildpack integration, and like it may be useful for us as well as like other maintainers to track like which projects like so these are links to specific issues would say that
Mm. Hmm.
a add buildback support, and then I have like a quick description of what it does, and I don't know if you want to update it over time with saying like, hey, this was the blocker, or
How'd you find these?
so I created a random GitHub search which did a lot of filtering on organizations and keywords, and uh, tried to find open issues and then saw through them in some order. Uh, but these looked interesting to me. Like some of them, for example, are like this backstage one. It's a CNCF sandbox project, uh, which is like I think it was created by Spotify for like uh, some sort of a developer box that lets you create template services easily or something like that. I didn't look
Okay.
too much into it, but they were discussing like whether build packs would be a good way to like quickly start creating images for developers or things like that. So this, like, given that it's also a CNCF project, I thought like maybe it's worth reaching out to them, saying that hey, we're here if you need any help.
Right.
And similarly, like a bunch of these other ones are like, so this is a Binder Hub is again like a pretty famous community project for hosting Jupyter notebooks. This is the tool that creates those images that they use. So they use this hacky way where they have a templated Docker file that creates the image for them. Like I think bunch of these different integrations may be nice to sort of expand our community, and also for us to figure out like what's missing that's preventing adoption.
Yeah. I do wonder like what who would be the most appropriate person to be responsible for something like this, right? Like, so I'm maybe taking a few steps forward, right? But like, let's say that we could automate a way for to scrape the internet for like potential requests of build packs, right? And I associate it with like somebody then going in there and saying like, hey, if you need any help, like let us know, blah, 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 right? And then maybe start a dialogue. To me, that like that sounds like the trait of like outreach, right? In a way, which I'm not sure falls under any particular sub team, right? Like, is it a learning thing? I feel like we might be a little bit out of our realm. to some
Mm.
extent. If let's say it's something like life cycle specific, I for sure wouldn't touch it, right? Potentially. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure. So that's a very interesting conversation. I wonder if it's worth bringing up in either the working group or the leadership meeting, about maybe having either the core team do it or, you know, I don't know, finding a solution for the right approach.
Because I think, for example, like this AWS App Runner one, I think Emily found out about this issue and reached out saying that, hey, we are here if you need any help
Right.
integrating. And
Yeah, but I definitely didn't know that there were that many.
yeah,
Did you see?
uh,
I think GitLab has one. I don't know if it's tied to DevOps or sorry, is it called AutoOps, Auto DevOps, something like that? They have a current integration with Buildpacks, but I know that they have an issue open where they want to be able to contribute like the test API, right? Or like they're very interested in the test API, and so they have an issue to track that. So I think very similar there. It'd be interesting, like as we start working through a test API to get their involvement.
not
All right.
tracking issues, tracking
Yeah.
this. And
Do you want to add a link to that
yep.
doc that you created? Yeah, it's really interesting. So I guess what's the action item right now? Is it just bringing it up on working group?
Yeah, either the working group or the leadership meeting and figuring out if we should be doing this and if we should be, which sub team should be doing this.
Like we'll need volunteers of some sort, right? All right. I think, are we done with pre-adopters?
Yep.
All right. What about the how to get more docs contributors? Did we skip over that?
Yeah, I think we sort of touched upon it, like making the contributors page more public, putting it on the website, maybe a bit done.
Do we want to provide, kind of like that guided questionnaire that Mozilla,
Uh,
do we see value in creating this, right? Like, would it actually, like, I don't know,
so
should we just throw a whole bunch of Google Analytics and be like, okay, how many contributors actually came through this path, right?
I don't know. For Mozilla, it makes sense because they have so many projects,
Yeah,
and like for us, it's a limited like list of repositories to contribute to. So I think just maybe just having that page that you've already created being somewhere more public, maybe a good start.
cool. Yeah, and then we could revisit it in the
Yeah.
future.
The other thing we talked about last time was like this CNCF contributors page. I think Natalie was supposed to create a service desk ticket because we're still listed as a sandbox project.
Mhm. There's an edit page on the right-hand side.
Yeah. That's what I think someone was supposed to do, like go and edit it. But I don't know if we should. I think that like what can I do for Mozilla may be applicable to what can I do for CNCF. Like CNCF is broad enough to warrant something like this.
Yeah.
So I think they have like similar attributes here, but I think they could do better with how this information is organized.
I know this is something very different, but another approach when we're asked about like how to get more docs contributors. One of the things I'm really interested to try is similar to Google Summer of Code. There's the Google Season of Docs, right?
Yeah, I think we also talked about that last time.
Yeah. So we haven't tried it, but I'm definitely interested in doing it in the next go around. And I don't know if you'd be interested as well. as maintainer now. I
Yep.
think that'd be
I
interesting.
I was sort of involved in this back in 2019 with a separate open source organization. But I think we can definitely put a proposal up at the very least. I don't know if CNCF participates in it or whether we'll be participating in it individually.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. I know there's a whole repo for mentoring in the CNCF. Yeah, they do. Cool.
Okay.
So I'll add. There you go. So if you, there's the CNCF mentoring GitHub page, and on there, there's a couple more programs that they participate in. So Season of Docs is one.
Interesting. Cool. I did not know about Cross. Interesting.
Open source research experience.
I think that's it. Should I assign this to you?
Which one exactly?
The
Yeah, I could definitely do that.
Yeah, see, it doesn't let me assign it to you either.
Good, perfect. Love it. I guess I'll assign it to myself.
Maybe no.
It's for my, yeah, that I was gonna say my email address is slightly backwards. It's R
Ah, okay.
Javier. Try R Javier, see what happens. Who did you assign it to?
I don't know.
Who is this other me?
I don't know how to delete this. That's
There you go.
cool.
All right. Cool. So that makes sense. So it seems like we've got a few little action items, nothing too crazy. And more like just future thinking, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I guess the pre-adopters thing, is that something you want to take on, bringing up in working group
Yep.
or discuss? All right, let's try this. I can't assign stuff to you. All right, go for it. You can assign it to me.
Cool.
All right. Well, I think we actually went over a little bit, but it was very useful. I appreciate your time, Sam.
Same.
Cool. All right, go take a break. Go home or something. I don't know what you do.
Till at home.
Oh, hey. See, I thought you were at the office. I don't know.
No, no, no. This is my home.
Okay.